Now, Labour's 4 leadership candidates will go head-to-head tonight, live on Sky News in the final TV debate. The latest polls, seen by us, put Jeremy Corbyn in the lead, but they do suggest so-called Corbyn mania is starting to lose its appeal. Well, meanwhile, a survey of Sky News viewers has revealed they would only prefer Boris Johnson over the Labour backbencher as Britain's next Prime Minister. Well, let's get a view on the race. The former Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, joins us now live from northwest London. Welcome to you, Ken Livingstone. Polls seen by Sky News suggest that Corbyn mania may be on the wane. How confident are you that he will be Labour's next leader?
I still think on balance Jeremy's going to win, but you've got to look at the scale of media attacks on Jeremy. You had 2-page spreads in the Daily Mail suggesting we'll be in a civil war if he becomes Prime Minister. It almost takes me back to what was being said about me 15 years ago when I was running for mayor, and I remember a journalist in The Observer said I was just like Mao Zedong, which I thought was a bit over the top.
Well, yes, you might say so. However, how confident do you think the public is in general about Labour under Jeremy Corbyn? Does he have the broad appeal, do you think, to win the next election?
If you think back, when John Major, to everyone's surprise, won the 92 election, one of the biggest factors was people said they thought he was a nice guy. And this is what comes over about Jeremy. He's a regular guy, people like him. That's a big factor. Not as important as having an economic strategy. And that's why I think Jeremy can win the next election. If you go on the websites of all the Labour candidates, Jeremy's the only one who's got really detailed, spelt out policies about how to raise the money to do the things to modernise our economy, how to have a fairer tax system. A lot of the others, it's just a few general things about a better Britain and all of that. Jeremy's got that detail, and that's what we didn't have at the election back in May when we lost. We didn't have a way of explaining to people how we could pay for investment and things like that, and so we fell apart. Jeremy, combination of being a nice guy and having a credible economic strategy that gives young people a chance for a good life in the future, that will appeal to it's an awful lot of Tories who are worried their kids will never be able to afford to buy a home. We can reach them.
I'm sure a lot of people would agree with you that economic credibility is important, particularly given the public view, according to the polls, of Labour and the economy since the financial crisis. However, some people would say, OK, his policy may be detailed and spelled out, but we don't agree with it. They don't like this idea of QE for people, of printing money to get out of problems. They worry that that will boost inflation, especially at a time when the economy is growing, and that will just mean that the cost of living will go up for people.
Well, that's the key factor. I mean, we can't afford to borrow more. We're too much in debt. If we're going to modernise our transport, our broadband, build homes, you've got to find a way of getting that money. And let's be honest, the Bank of England over the last few years has created £375 billion to prop up the banks.
Yes, but
hasn't fueled inflation, hasn't caused any
it?
Problems.
It is rowing back on that particular
issue. It doesn't need to.
But the economy is growing, and there are fears about inflation, aren't there, if you carry on with that?
There are no fears about inflation. You would only get inflation from quantitative easing if unemployment was down at about 2%, as it was in that post-war period. Perhaps at the end of Jeremy Corbyn's first term, you would have to say, well, we can't carry on with that policy because we've now got full employment, everyone's in work, wages are up. But that's not going to be where we are in 2020, when I think the economy will be in a very bad way. We're not getting the investment. And if you look, every successful economy in the world is led by high levels of investment. We're piddling along at about 14%. I mean, it's appalling.
16 minutes past 7. After a week of criticism, there's been a show of support for Jeremy Corbyn's economic policies, as Simon has been finding out, and he's here.
Thanks, Justin. Yes, over the weekend, 40 economists signed an open letter in support of Jeremy Corbyn's anti-austerity policies. Among them was Danny Blanchflower, former member of the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee. Now, he's got critics too, of course, including members of his own party, some of whom have dismissed Jeremy Corbyn's plans as lacking economic credibility. Part of his thinking is this idea of people's quantitative easing, people's QE. This is an idea first suggested by Richard Murphy, economic advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, and in some ways the architect of Corbynomics. I asked Richard Murphy to explain the idea.
The National Investment Bank effectively borrows money from the government at the lowest possible interest rate the government can provide it at, the Bank of England base rate. That National Investment Bank will then invest in schools, in hospitals, in roads, in new energy systems and whatever it is that this country needs. Think of it like PFI. PFI is used to provide government infrastructure funding without increasing government borrowing, at maybe 1/20th of the cost of PFI. This idea can do the same job.
And just clarify why this is not adding to the national debt.
Because actually it is the government lending to itself. The government owns its own bank, but hasn't borrowed from it. In effect, I'm saying that is possible. Mark Carney has said it is possible. So why aren't we using the cheapest money that is available to achieve that goal?
Would Jeremy Corbyn sack a Bank of England governor who didn't agree to do this?
Bank of England governors are responsible to democratically elected politicians. If we have governors who think they are over and above the rule of democratically elected politicians, then I'm afraid to say, yes, they should be on the next plane.
So you're saying that the Bank of England's independence is a fiction?
There is no such thing as Bank of England independence. There never has been. It's a fiasco put together, a facade created to appease people, to put forward a presentation of something that doesn't exist.
They have a monetary policy committee of 9 members, many of whom are external. Are you saying that pressure is brought on them to sort of change monetary policy?
Let's look at the latest OBR, Office for Budget Responsibility, forecast. They give
another independent body.
Well, if you can call a body that has its office 2 doors down from the Chancellor independent, yes, I don't believe that at all, frankly. But the Office for Budget Responsibility has issued a forecast which says at the end of this year it is expecting interest rates to rise. If you were sitting on the Monetary Policy Committee, might you take that as some steer that the Chancellor would be happy if that's what you did?
But if you're a principled independent member, you would have your own mind, which is probably why they're selected.
So we get a fairly standard hegemonic view.
I don't think you could describe people like Danny Blanchflower, Andrew Sentence as being sort of part of the political hegemony, could you?
I know Danny, I don't think I would do that, but then Danny often stood out from the crowd when he was on the Monetary Policy Committee. The point is that at the end...
So there are lots of independent voices on that committee.
But at the end of the day, they will follow the broad line that is being laid down by the Treasury.
Okay.
In other words, I do not believe that there is such a thing as clear independence of the Bank of England. And what is more, I don't believe in it because I believe the people of this country must elect the people who are responsible for our economic policy.
So it's not just achievable, it's not even desirable?
I don't even think it's desirable. No, I think it was a mistake to pretend that we had a Bank of England that was independent of the Treasury.
Let me finish with this thought. Ed Miliband set out the most leftist agenda we've seen from a Labour Party since possibly the 1980s. And he got murdered at the polls for it. What evidence is there that there's appetite in the country for your plans?
Ed Miliband and Ed Balls went to the country saying they were going to deliver austerity light. And as a result, people said, well, if I'm going to vote for austerity, I might as well vote for austerity full, which is George Osborne.
I just don't understand the logic of that.
The reality is, you probably didn't understand also why the SNP managed to sweep 56 out of 59 seats in Scotland, because they were presented with a different narrative.
You're saying that people didn't want cuts, and yet they voted for the party which promised to cut the most.
Let's look at what happened in the profile of people who voted. The young simply didn't turn up because there was no option for them that they thought was in any way tenable. My argument is people have said, at last, here is an alternative which does restore confidence in the political system because it's saying something else is possible, and that's what I'm trying to deliver.
Richard Murphy there, the economic advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, the architect, if you like, of Corbynomics, explaining some of those views there.
And should Jeremy Corbyn win the race, and obviously we won't know that result until the 12th of September, what do you think it will mean for unity within the party? We've already seen 2 of the other leadership candidates, Yvette Cooper and Liz Kendall, saying that they wouldn't take part in a Jeremy Corbyn cabinet. How tough will it be to unite the Labour Party, and how should he go about doing it?
Well, that's one of the good things about Jeremy. He is a nice guy. I've never seen him lose his temper. He will be open. He will consult. There'll be no more of this nonsense we had in the New Labour years that you open the paper and see a new policy's been announced. That's the first you've ever heard about it. We'll be looking in that traditional Labour value way of long period of consultation, debate, involving people and getting a consensus around those policies. I think Jeremy will be a very consensual leader. And if you look at Chuka Ummuna, who a few weeks ago was, he wouldn't touch Jeremy Corbyn and all of that.
Would you serve in a Corbyn shadow cabinet?
No, I would not, because I think it would be very hard for me to comply with collective responsibility in that context. There are too many fundamental things that I disagree with him on, in particular on how we manage the economy.
Now, you said in July that you wouldn't serve in a Corbyn shadow cabinet, not least because you said there are too many fundamental things I disagree with him on. You would still say that, would you? What has changed?
Well, the first thing to say, of course, is it's not clear who will win. A lot of presumptions have been made about that. And also, secondly, I don't presume that whoever will win will necessarily ask me to serve in the shadow cabinet. But the reason why at that point I said that I thought it most unlikely I'd be able to do so was because there were too many fundamental points of principle on which I saw differences.
And in your keenness to shape that message that Labour is giving out, if Jeremy Corbyn did win and asked you to serve in his cabinet, would you say yes?
It will completely depend on the programme that you've been asked to sign up to. I've just explained to you the misgivings I have and some of the points of principle that I have. He has many points of principle, I have them too. And if I was,
so it sounds
for example,
unlikely.
being asked... Well, it completely depends, but I think ultimately, I think we're all keen to contribute. And as I said,
we've had months, of course, we've had months of him setting out what he would do. So
we've also had months of disagreement and us all turning in on each other. And I think we need to turn our fire on the Tories now, because that's the only way we're going to actually build a fairer, more equal Britain. That's why we all joined the Labour Party in the first place.
He's now saying we've all got to work together, and I think there'll be a few disgruntled people that will all grump away on the back benches, but the vast majority of Labour MPs will say, right, we now got a leader, let's put together the programme that can win us the next election.
OK, well, Ken Livingstone, thanks very much indeed for giving us your views.